All right, so ready to dive deep on Bitcoin. Not the surface stuff you want, like the full story. The tech, what it means, all of it.
We're going to unpack all of that, yeah.
You came to the right place. We've got articles, notes, everything right here ready to go. So Bitcoin, it's like the first cryptocurrency, right?
Yeah, the OG.
Came out in 2008, right when the whole financial crisis was
Yeah,
happening.
and at the same time.
And right in the middle of it all, there's this mysterious Satoshi Nakamoto.
Yeah, Satoshi's a real enigma. Nobody actually knows who they are, or even if they is right,
Right.
one person, a group, we don't know. It's crazy.
That's a story for another time, maybe. But before we go too far, let's take a step back to the basics. What is Bitcoin, really, at its core?
You could call it digital cash,
Okay, so it's digital cash,
but it uses this revolutionary technology, blockchain.
blockchain. I'll be honest, that sounds kind of intimidating. What does
Yeah.
that even mean in plain English?
Sure. So imagine like a huge digital ledger, totally public, anyone can see it. Every Bitcoin transaction ever is on there, a permanent record with a timestamp and everything.
Okay, so I'm picturing a massive spreadsheet.
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
How does that make it more secure than, say, just a bank's database?
It's all about how these records are connected. Every transaction, we call them blocks, they're chained to the one before it, makes this unbreakable chain. And to mess with it, to change anything, you'd have to change every single block in the chain. On countless computers all over the world, it's basically impossible.
So you're saying there's no way to cheat the system, no adding a couple extra Bitcoins for yourself?
Well, unless you somehow had more computing power than the entire Bitcoin network combined, then no, not going to happen.
Right.
And that brings us to mining.
Ah, Bitcoin mining. It's like the new gold rush. But what does it actually entail?
So mining is how new blocks get added to that blockchain we talked about. Miners, they use insanely powerful computers to solve crazy complicated math problems. And first one to crack the code, they get to add the next block to the chain. And they get some Bitcoin as a reward.
So what you're telling me is I need a supercomputer and, like, my own power plant just to have a chance.
Pretty much. The energy consumption is a big deal now, a serious barrier to entry. Most people just buy Bitcoin. It's way more realistic than trying to mine it yourself these days.
That makes sense. So we have this secure digital ledger with all these transactions, and it's maintained by this huge network of miners. It's a lot to take in. But what makes Bitcoin really interesting is the limited supply.
Absolutely. Unlike regular currencies where governments can just print more, Bitcoin has a hard limit. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins.
Exactly. And that fixed supply, I mean, that's a big part of why people see so much value in Bitcoin.
You're right.
Like, it's like digital gold. That scarcity, it's built right in. Digital gold, okay. But I've also heard, digital cash, so can you actually spend it like regular money?
Yeah.
I've had that story about the guy buying pizza with Bitcoin way back.
Ah, you mean Laszlo Hanyecz, those pizzas. That's become a legendary story in the Bitcoin world.
That's the one.
Yeah.
What was so special about those pizzas, though?
Well, it was 2010, and he bought these two pizzas, right, with 10,000 Bitcoins.
Okay.
And back then, Bitcoin was basically worthless, like a few cents per coin, if that. No one could predicted what would happen.
And what did happen? Those pizzas are the world's most expensive meal now, right?
It's not an exaggeration to say that, no. Today, 10,000 Bitcoins. Millions, billions even. It shows you how much Bitcoin's value has gone up.
That's quite the return on investment. But that jump, it also sounds a little, well, volatile.
You're right. Bitcoin is volatile. It hit almost $68,000 in 2021, then crashed in 2022.
For someone who's still trying to understand all this, what does volatile really mean when we're talking Bitcoin?
It means the price can change like tea really fast. It's a double-edged sword, huge potential gains, but also big risk of losing a lot.
What caused those price swings then? The ones we saw.
It's always a combination of things. World events like the war in Ukraine that shook up all the markets, crypto included. And then there was the whole FTX exchange collapse. That really shook people's trust.
Yeah, FTX, that was huge news. Okay, so we've got this digital gold, limited supply, price goes up and down like crazy. But then there's the whole decentralized thing.
Absolutely. That's a major difference from regular money. With traditional currencies, governments and central banks, they're in control. With Bitcoin, no one's in control.
Wait, if there's no one in charge, then who decides what happens? How does that even work?
It's all about the network.
Yeah.
Bitcoin runs on a global network of computers, and they all follow the same set of rules. Those rules are written into the software itself. No government can change its value, can't shut it down, and transactions can't be censored either.
So it's like peer-to-peer cash, cutting out all the middlemen. No banks, no governments. Wow. That's kind of a radical idea.
It is, and that's what's so exciting about it for a lot of people. It has the potential to really change finance as we know it.
But this whole decentralization thing,
Mm.
isn't that where some of the problems come up too? Like, how do you even regulate something that's designed to be outside of the normal system?
That's the million-dollar question, right? It's this regulatory gray area. Makes governments nervous. Some are open to it. Some have tried to ban it outright. And that uncertainty, it definitely plays a role in Bitcoin's volatility.
So it's a tough balance. The same thing that makes Bitcoin so revolutionary also makes it unpredictable.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange balance to strike. And speaking of global impact, remember how we were talking about Bitcoin mining?
Right.
There's a whole other layer to that.
Yeah, you mentioned China, I think.
Exactly. China, they used to be like the Bitcoin mining hub.
Hmm.
Huge percentage of the global hash rate. But then 2021, they really came down hard on crypto, basically banned mining altogether.
Wow. I didn't realize it was that recent. What happened? Did that cause like a big upheaval in the Bitcoin world?
It was a big deal. Miners had to scramble to find new places to operate, totally shifted the balance of mining power,
Huh.
really raised some important questions too.
Like what kind of questions come up when one country has that much influence over Bitcoin mining?
Well, it made people nervous about the whole decentralization thing, for one. Like, if one government can disrupt the network like that, is it actually as decentralized as we think?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then it also really highlighted the environmental impact.
Right, because all that computing power, that takes a ton of energy.
Exactly. And with China gone, suddenly everyone's trying to find new mining hubs, places with cheap electricity, but not always the cleanest energy.
Hmm.
So all of a sudden, Bitcoin's carbon footprint became a much bigger part of the conversation.
Yeah, it's like a whole other side of Bitcoin. Not just the tech and the money, but like global politics and the environment.
Absolutely. Which brings us back to you. We've gone through a lot today. The basics of blockchain, the mystery of Satoshi, regulations, everything. What's sticking with you from all of this?
I think what really strikes me is that Bitcoin is so much more than just one thing. It's tech, it's economics, it's politics, even philosophy in a way. It's not just about investing. It's about like challenging the way we think about financial systems, about power structures.
Yeah,
It's pretty big.
that's a really great point. And it shows why it's so important to look beyond the surface, to really understand the nuances. There are so many perspectives on this.
Totally. So for someone who's listening, who's interested in learning more, where would you even recommend they start?
One great way to start is to look at the different ways people are actually using Bitcoin. We talked about digital gold, but some see it as a tool for financial inclusion, especially in developing countries. And then there's the environmental impact. There are people working on making mining more sustainable. It's fascinating to look at all the different sides of it.
It's like we've opened up this whole new world.
Exactly. And the best part is, this is really just the beginning.
That's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Bitcoin.